Looking to buy a car this season and not sure where to start? Try FlexCar instead. FlexCar is Atlanta's only month-to-month car lease that includes your vehicle, mileage, insurance, maintenance, roadside assistance, and more. Cars start at $199 per month, and there are 0 down payments. Plus, you can cancel anytime with no penalties or swap cars whenever your needs change. Get approved in minutes and pick up your car, or have your car delivered straight to you. Get started today at flexcar.com and receive 100 free miles on your first order with the code ATL100.
When you need mealtime inspiration, it's worth shopping Kroger for thousands of appetizing ingredients that inspire countless mouth-watering meals. And no matter what tasty choice you make, you'll enjoy our everyday low prices. Plus, extra ways to save, like digital coupons worth over $600 each week and up to $1 off per gallon at the pump with points. So you can get big flavors and big savings. Kroger, fresh for everyone. Fuel restrictions apply.
You're listening to the Think Unbroken podcast, and I'm your host, Michael Unbroken. I'm an author, speaker, coach, and advocate for adult survivors of childhood trauma and abuse. In this podcast, you will learn how to transform your trauma into triumph, turn breakdowns into breakthroughs, and go from victim to being the hero of your own story. You can learn more at thinkunbrokenpodcast.com, and of course, check us out on Apple Podcasts and Spotify at Think Unbroken Podcast. That's what most people don't understand. I mean, it is simply a coping mechanism, and addiction is this thing that until you like really sit in the harvest of your seeds, for lack of a better way to phrase it, it's one of those things where you're like, wait a second, hold on, I'm reaping what I've sown here. And for a long time, because it's so avoidant, it becomes this rinse and repeat pattern. Where you're like, I screwed up, I go to the addiction. I made a mistake, I go to the addiction. I hurt someone's feelings, I go to the addiction. I didn't show up for myself, I go to the addiction. And then next thing you know, your life's in complete turmoil. And I try to tell people all the time, like, when I ended up at 25 years old, 350 pounds, smoking 2 packs a day, drinking myself to sleep, cheating on my girlfriend, I can promise you that those were all coping mechanisms. Nothing about my life. And obviously people of the show know my story, my background, being homeless as a kid, a drug addict at 12. Like, nothing about my life had set me up for anything but that kind of life. And it really becomes this question of nature versus nurture. And there are people who will hear this and they'll go, well, Timothy's life really wasn't that bad. How did he become an addict? And it's like, addiction doesn't care if your father was a preacher or a drug dealer. Addiction doesn't care if you're white or black or what side of town you grew up on. Addiction is a biochemical response to stressor. Addiction is this thing that we seek because the dopamine hit is so good. This is why you hear people who've done heroin, they will say, like, the first time I got high was the greatest day of my life, and I've been chasing that experience ever since. And no matter what, they never get there again. And so we're chasing and chasing and chasing. And I think it'd be remiss of me not to really go into the question that I think is incredibly important. Human sexuality is a part of our experience. And I think to negate that is dismissive to what it means to be a human being. And so I'm curious, how do you, like, in that time, did you have any healthy sexual relationships with yourself, with others, or was it all strewn through this scope of addiction?
Well, once I got older and got married, I did have all throughout this time, I had a healthy sex life with my wife during, and I was in long-term relationships before that, but especially after I got married in the first 10 years of our marriage, we had a happy, healthy, positive sex life, right? I mean, obviously there was some hurt there when she found out about some of the things happening, but it wasn't like I wasn't getting what I needed on the surface level, on a sexual level from her. It wasn't like I was going to porn and going to other girls because they would do something or providing something that my wife wouldn't, or my wife wasn't willing to be open to me sexually. And I was able to do that because my issue had nothing to do with sex. Sex was just the outlet, Like you say, it could have been any of these number of other things, drugs, alcohol, food, gambling, whatever. Mine was porn and sex. But what's so dangerous about porn and sex versus some of those other things is that it always has to be new. You're always, like you say with heroin, you're chasing that first high, right? It's the same thing with this. You're constantly trying to up it, constantly trying to find the next new thing, the next new thing, the next new thing. Whereas, like with an alcoholic, you just drink more, right? You just drink more. You build up a tolerance, but you just drink more. Well, with porn, you don't just watch the same porn video over and over again. You got to find something new. And what might start off very vanilla, I guess, and you find guys getting into really dark, kind of stuff they're almost disgusted by, just because they constantly need to be upping that dopamine dose in their brain. And that's kind of the biological side of it too. And why it has the same somewhat effects on the brain. The medical studies have shown this as drug abuse does. So, there's all these kind of different things that go into that. But at the core of it, the cause of it is an emotional issue, not a sexual issue. And so the trying to deal with it on the sexual level, like, oh, well, just have sex with your wife. Well, I did. And that doesn't work because my problem wasn't sexual. My problem was emotional.
And often you find that problem, and you mentioned this, has nothing to do with your partner, has nothing to do with the people in your life, and those people, because I've been down this path personally, is you look at this in all sorts of addiction. I mean, there's almost nothing I haven't been addicted to. And I sit here, I look at my life today and I go, what it used to be, and I say this now in jest and I get to laugh at it, but I used to just always be like, I'm all in or I'm all out, which does apply to a lot of my life. And I'm very happy I'm all out on most things these days. But back then I'd be like, this is just how I am. Take it or leave it. And in that, what you come to realize is like, it's not even, this is the darkness of it, right? Of whatever the addiction is. It's not even the pain that you're causing yourself that's so devastatingly bad. It's like looking in the eyes of the person across from you and having to tell the truth. And that's where people get trapped in this conversation. And that's why, like, there's no taboo subject on this show. And that's something I've held very close to the heart, because like we all have struggles. We all have this thing that we have to work through. I remember constantly, especially in my late teens and early 20s, because I had an amazing girlfriend who was supportive. I was making good money. I had an awesome place that I lived in. It was like this constant self-sabotage that was happening. Now, I didn't have the words then. My words then is like, why am I up all the time? And so I'm wondering, like, where did the cognizance of the issue really start to come to place? Like, when did it really start to make sense to you? We're like, wait a second, something's not right here.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think there was two situations there. The first was a conviction that it was wrong just from the get-go. And some of maybe that is my Christian beliefs, that I believe it's wrong from that level. The unfortunate part is a lot of that came with a lot of shame. So I was taught that porn was bad, that premarital sex was bad, all these things. But that was it. Just it's wrong. Don't do it. It's a rule. I wasn't taught why that's a rule, or why, that sex is actually a happy, healthy thing that God wants us to have. We just need to learn to use it in a healthy way, in the way that he designed it for. So there was a lot of shame that came from that. And then like you said earlier, you do something bad, you feel bad for doing something bad. You need to escape that feeling bad, so you do something bad again.
It goes out to everyone who's ever experienced that, because it's when you are in the wrong homes, which obviously sounds like you got frequency of, there's no doubt that children are looked at as checks. And I saw that vividly and firsthand. I guess you could call it secondhand. I never lived in the homes, but I was in them enough. I was never in the system. But my stepfather's mother was a foster care parent. And I have said this publicly. She's arguably one of the worst human beings I've ever known. But then I think to myself, God, how bad was her life? Right? Because this is hurt people, at the end of the day. But you did something really interesting at such a young age, and you chose homelessness. You chose to leave. You chose to get away. For me, it wasn't a choice. At 8 years old, getting bounced around like that, I had no idea. I thought it was just like my life. I thought it was normal to sleep and spend the night in a van. But you chose it because you realized that you wanted something more. But here you are now in this position where I would have to imagine there's like this really interesting juxtaposition and internal argument that you're having, where on one hand, it's like, you could be warm tonight and suffer, or you could be cold tonight and be free. How did you guys get to that point?
It took some months of really suffering and just understanding that it was never going to get better, because we went from one foster house to the other, to the other, to the other, and it was just always a nightmare. And it was the most exciting that we felt was when we were out walking by ourselves out of the foster homes. And it was also not something that we planned. It was, we were at our last foster house. It was really terrible. And we had just gone through so much, and the emotional side, I think, was the worst part. You know, like, okay, you can starve me, you can wake me up with spray bottles, and you can try to molest me, all the weird that people do, like, you're all predators and you all, and you all. That was my mindset back then. And none of that really matters to me as much as what mattered was how good I felt when I was outside in the sunshine with my brother doing our things. So we're in this house, and it's like the straw that broke the camel's back. Like, you know, it was so insignificant. I don't remember the trigger. I just remember that I came into the foster home after being outside and immediately was just confronted and yelled at and belittled, and it was condescending talk, and it was just, I could feel like hatred and anger bubbling up. Tears were coming out of my eyes. I wasn't like weeping, and I wasn't red-faced or anything, but I was just getting this like emotional uproar. And I remember that just like a knee-jerk reaction, the only thing I could do was just turn and run. And so I just turned and I just ran out the door, and Anthony ran out beside me, and the two of us just ran as fast as we could, as far as we could, for as long as we could, and just never looked back. And we ran, you know, CPS obviously comes after you. They kidnap children all the time, and there's all kinds of stuff I'd like to talk about for that on another time. But they came for us for about 6 months. They'd come skidding around the corner like DEA agents and try to box us in, and we would hop fences and get away. And after about 6 months, they just stopped coming. They just gave up. And that's, at that moment, we were finally, wards of the court, we were finally free. And it wasn't easy. We were, I mean, you know, freezing cold at night and shivering and wet in the rain and having to break into garages to escape it, and eating candy bars and raw hot dogs. I mean, it was rough, but yeah, we chose it for sure. It was better than foster care. Yeah.
That's the same thought I have about living with my grandmother. I mean, she had taken one of my little brothers. I had been living in an abandoned house by myself for about 6 weeks in the blistering hot summer of Indiana, stealing food from the Big Lots on the corner of 30th and Georgetown, mainly candy, because I was like 11 and I didn't know. And I was, one night she comes by the house and she's like, "Where's your mom?" And I say, "I haven't seen my mom in weeks. I'm literally, there's no water, there's no electricity. The house smells disgusting. It's scorching hot." And she's like, "All right, you're coming with me." Because she already had one of my little brothers. And so I go stay with her, and I really, really didn't want to be there. I'm biracial, black and white. My grandma's an old racist white lady from a town in Tennessee you never heard of. So imagine the person who's supposed to love you and help you calling you all these horrible racial epitaphs with a copy of Mein Kampf, Hitler's autobiography, on the kitchen table. My uncle's in the Aryan Brotherhood, like the whole thing. She'd give me white boy haircuts with like the chili bowl, you know? Imagine this hair getting those haircuts. And you're like, okay, wait a second. Well, this is better. This is the alternative to being on the street. Right. And sometimes it is that. And like, while it was reversed for us, it was still kind of the same thing. This suffering is better than that suffering. And, you know, my mom would disappear for weeks at a time. no one knew where she was. My stepdad had taken my baby brother, and he was like an over-the-road trucker, never talked to that guy. And I remember people would ask me, like, are you talking to your mom? Where is she? What's going on? Where's your stepdad? I'm like, I have no idea. And so I was like really just in the streets, just doing whatever it took to survive. And so I'm curious, were you in communication with your parents at all? Like, did they know what was happening?
Well, we weren't, but I do want to say, you're making me feel almost blessed to have this foster system that was a nightmare, because for you to have war within your own family, like your own grandma, I couldn't imagine what that must have been like for you and what you must have been going through. I'm sure emotionally we dealt with a lot of similarities, but that's I mean, wow. I've always been able to have this idea of like my perfect mom and dad, and if they weren't in prison, how they'd be for me. And my grandfather was pretty amazing for me. And so my heart goes out to the young you that, that I'm sure that you're hugging right now and you've healed, but my heart goes out to him. And, that's crazy. But as far as my parents go, I was in touch with my dad, never. But he was shipped off to prison a few months before the DEA raided our house, and I lost my mom. So he got locked up in August, and he would call the house once a week. We would chat. Before my mom got locked up, he'd call the house once a week and we would chat. Then he was sort of off. And then they came in and raided the house and took my mom. And at that point, we didn't talk to our dad again for many, many years. My mom, for the first few weeks, we would go visit her. My grandfather would come and take us to go visit her. We were squatting in the house, sort of similar to you. And my grandfather would come by and check on us. He'd bring us like old expired food and stuff like that. That was his thing. He shopped at flea markets and stuff. He showed up one night with a garbage bag full of expired, like crackers or something. And so we would squat there and do our thing.
Wayfair's Black Friday preview sale is here early. Right now, score up to 70% off everything home with fast shipping. And for a limited time, get 10% back when you join Wayfair Rewards. Shop early Black Friday deals now at wayfair.com. Terms apply.
Wayfair, every style, every home.
88% of the work week is spent communicating, typing, talking, and going back and forth on topics until everyone is on the same page. It's time for a change. It's time for Grammarly. Grammarly's AI ensures your team gets the point across the first time, eliminating misunderstandings and streamlining collaboration. It goes beyond basic grammar to help tailor writing to specific audiences, whether that means adding an executive summary, fine-tuning tone, or cutting out jargon in just one click. 4 out of 5 professionals say Grammarly's AI boosts buy-in and moves work forward. It integrates seamlessly with over 500,000 apps and websites, is implemented in days, and is IT approved. Join over 70,000 teams and 30 million people who trust Grammarly to elevate their communication. Visit Grammarly.com/enterprise to learn more. Grammarly, enterprise-ready AI.
This podcast is sponsored by Talkspace.
Maybe you've been thinking about therapy. You realize a therapist could help you work things out, but
I can't afford it. Therapy is expensive.
Talkspace is different. Talkspace is one of only a few online mental health providers that takes insurance. Average copays are only $15.
I can't afford $15.
And most insured members pay nothing.
Nothing? No copays at all? With insurance, I could see a therapist and I might not have to pay anything out of pocket?
That's right. Nothing should stand in your way of getting support from a caring, licensed therapist. And if you don't have insurance, no problem. You can pay out of pocket for a lower cost than in-person therapy. And because you meet your therapist online, you can schedule appointments for whenever and wherever it's most comfortable for you.
Wow, I'm feeling better already. You can pay for Talkspace with insurance or get $80 off your first month with promo code SPACE80 when you go to Talkspace.com. Match with a licensed therapist today at Talkspace.com. Save $80 with code SPACE80 at Talkspace.com.
We had our grandfather, so we were happy, and he'd take us to visit our mom. So we were in touch the first 6 weeks, but then he died. He came over and died in the front yard, and that's like a whole other tragic story. Like, just how much more can you lose as a kid? We have this one guy we're hanging on to, and he passes away in the front yard right in front of us. And it was one of the worst experiences of my life was losing him. But at that point, we lost contact with our mother as well. And so from then on, it was just a memory, looking at the moon, remembering things she'd say, listening to a song, and, sort of hanging on to it. And then, that living in the past. And that's how you get these codependencies and this depression and this anxiety, and all the things that you battle as a young adult are all coming from like not letting go of the past and hanging on to something. And, we were just set up for this anxiety from the start. And it was, looking back, I wish I was me then. It would have been so easy.
Hey, Unbroken Nation, we'll be right back to the show, but I wanted to let you know that you can grab a copy of my first book, Think Unbroken, Understanding and Overcoming Childhood Trauma, for free. If you go to book.thinkunbroken.com, you can download the PDF ebook version of the book and get everything that I know about the baseline of healing trauma for free, downloaded to your email right now. Just go to book.thinkunbroken.com to download your copy of Think Unbroken, Understanding and Overcoming Childhood Trauma for a PDF for your phone. Again, that is book.thinkunbroken.com. Do you think stress is the precursor to what happened with you? And if so, like, where does the stress come from?
Perfect. So the 11 mental knots that I talked about, they're presented in a particular order, and it starts with stress. Stress is number one. But there are other things that can build on that stress, things like emotional pain, which was number two. So an addiction, stress, emotional pain, those three, they're all interrelated. And too much stress on the one hand can aggravate, let's say, an addiction on the other. But so to talk about stress, I want to just mention a little bit about how the brain works, okay? Because this will help frame everything. So the brain, okay, we've got 7 networks in our brain, and we're just figuring this out now. So what is a network? A network is just different parts of the brain that connect to do a function. So the visual network helps you see. Auditory network helps you hear. Sensorimotor cerebellar network help you move and sense. Then you've got 3 networks that are basically the key to mental well-being, happiness, and addiction, and all these other problems. One of them is default mode network, which is basically the ego. It's me, it's I. It is the location of self in the brain. And you'll notice it anytime your mind wanders away from the present, it'll turn on. So, and we're all different. For me, it's when I'm driving a car or brushing my teeth. As soon as I start that, boom, default mode network turns on. And I go off into the past or the future, and the thoughts come, fast and furious. Default mode tends to be judgmental, reactive, and very emotional. So when it's overactive, it can cause stress. Let's start with stress. So you're, let's say driving your car, and suddenly you remember an argument from yesterday that you had, or some childhood memory gives you some stress, just the memory of that. So what happened is your default mode gave you this memory of something that happened and has just given you stress, right? So that's the default mode. Now, the purpose of stress, what is the purpose of stress, right? We evolved thousands and thousands of years ago in a very different set of circumstances, right? We lived in a time where there was natural disasters and famine, and life was very difficult, right? The stress response helped us survive. It told us, crap, there's a predator coming. I gotta get out of here, or I gotta put up a fight, or like we're gonna go hungry the next couple of weeks. So cortisol kicks in, stress response. All of that helps us survive, and that's why we're here. But today, the stress response is caused by our phone or our memories or thoughts that aren't really threatening our survival, but it's triggering those same pathways. So, and all of this stress is causing damage to our bodies. It's leading to heart disease and strokes and cancers and all kinds of problems. So, so this stress response, it served us a good purpose back in the day. But now it's on overdrive, and our thoughts are on overdrive. The default mode is on overdrive, and our stress levels are through the roof.
Do you think that and thank you for that explanation. Do you think that stress today is different than stress for our parents or 50 years ago, 100 years ago? Is it more intense? Is it like if you were to put stress today in a box versus previous decades or generations, would it be the most stressful time in history outside of maybe World War II?
Yeah. Well, I think so because we're glued to our smartphones at least 4 hours a day, most of us on average. And anytime we look at our phone, let's say, what happens in the brain is you have signals of glutamate. It's called glutamate. It's how we have thoughts. And when we have too much thoughts and too much stimulation, basically, and we got a lot of glutamate, it sets the brain up for that stress response. We're more likely to get a stress response. So 50 years ago, we got stressed. There were things that made us stressed. There were probably things that were maybe more likely to threaten our survival, or let's say, about to get into a car accident or get in an argument with our neighbor or something like that. But that stress response kicked in. It saved us in the moment. And stress is important. It helps us. It saves us. But now the stress response is on all the time. And when an actual stressor happens, we're less able to actually deal with a real stressor, right?
Is the stress being on all the time, is that exclusively because of our phones, because of social media, because of work? Like what is keeping it on so much now?
Well, employers right now, they're encouraging their workers to multitask, to answer emails and to be on calls, and it's pretty demanding in corporate America. So all of this is contributing to high levels of stress. And I think it is part of the workplace. So I am seeing companies now investing in like mindfulness exercises and classes and things like that. I don't know how much that's helping, but the culture now is gearing and moving towards a place of greater stress, which damages our bodies.
How do you get to the place where you have people who have never believed in themselves start to believe in themselves?
Mm-hmm. It starts to me it really starts with asking questions. And what do we know about kids? They ask a ton of questions, right?
Yes, they do.
Right? To the point where it can drive us crazy. I mean, I have 5 kids and 3 amazing stepkids. And when my kids were young, they ask tons of questions. And to the point where it'd be like, oh my gosh, stop asking questions, right? It's but they're so curious. I mean, they just want to learn. They crave learning. And they ask and they ask and they ask questions. But what happens as we start going through school, you go to an elementary school, the class is full of people asking questions, raising hand, bothering the teacher, interrupting the teacher, right? And as we progress through different levels of school, we are told to stop, ask so many questions, put your hand down, stop, let me finish, let me continue the lesson. By the time you go to high school, you look at a high school classroom, hardly anyone's asking questions, right? Everyone is just sitting there listening. They've been told, don't interrupt, don't ask questions. And we lose that passionate curiosity where we just want to learn. We want to learn. Just so I tell people all the time, just start asking questions. Go back to your 2, 3, 4-year-old self where you're so curious about things. And you're not afraid to ask questions and almost be a little annoying sometimes. Be like, so how does that work? What do I have to do next? How does that work? What do I have to do next? Tell me more about that, which is a beautiful question, right? When someone is telling you something, tell me more about that. It gets, just that curiosity that just drives us. We have to get that back into our lives and just be willing to ask and ask and ask. And even be willing to ask someone where, they might not know the answer. Okay, who else do I need to talk to? Who might have the answer? Where do I go find the answer? The answers are out there, Michael. We just need to develop that curiosity of a 3-year-old again, to go figure stuff out.
Let's go through a scenario, because I think this would be very beneficial.
Mm-hmm.
When you're coaching people and you are helping people navigate problems, like that's what people come to you for, right? Same reason they come to me. We're helping them navigate problems.
Yeah.
I present you with a problem and I say, Robert, here's the reality. I am so clear about the vision that I want, but I can't seem to stop sabotaging myself.
Mm-hmm.
Like I know what I'm supposed to do, but I end up playing video games. I know what I'm supposed to do. I end up scrolling on TikTok. I know what I'm supposed to do. I end up going out to the buffet dinner, like whatever the thing is, right?
Mm-hmm.
What are they missing? Like, what is the pattern interrupt that has to take place? Because in your journey, there were a lot of moments in which you didn't have to do the thing that led you down the path to having the life that you wanted. You could have went a different direction. So what is like when presented with these problems, like what are we needing to do to actually solve them?
So my experience working with business owners for the last few years, when they have a goal and we talk about, okay, what are some strategies to accomplish this goal, right? What are you trying to achieve? What are some strategies? And the strategies are the hows, right? How am I going to accomplish this goal? And oftentimes if we don't know the how, we go find the how, we go talk to other business owners, we do some research, right? We go try to figure out potential hows, potential strategies. And then once we settle on a strategy, okay, this is how we're going to go do it. And we define some actions. Okay, these are the actions to take. My discovery, Michael, is if someone is not taking the action, it is because they lack the confidence. Either they lack the confidence that that action is actually going to achieve the result that we hope it will, right? Or they lack the knowledge of actually how to implement the action. Right. And so they might tell themselves, okay, I'm going to go do this. But deep down inside, there's a tension where they don't believe that this is what they need to do. Right. So they don't do it. They go play a video game or they go do something else. Right. What I found is if we have the confidence that this is exactly the right action that we need to take, and we have the knowledge on how to take that action, and we have the resources, if resources are required, right, to take that action. It could be money, it could be time, right? If we have the resources, we have the knowledge, we have the confidence, we're going to take the action, right? If we want that result big enough, if that's the right result, and if that result is connected to our vision, right, of what we're trying to accomplish. If all those things are in alignment, right, we have the vision, we know the result we're going to accomplish. We know the strategy and what actions we need to take. We have the confidence. We have the resources. We have the skill set. Then my experience working with my clients is they're going to take the action. They're going to do it, right? If they're not doing it, one of those things is missing. And when I start working with someone, I'm waiting for that moment, Michael, where we get to the action and it's like, okay, what action are you going to take? What does that look like for you? When are you going to get it done? When I follow up with them a week or 2 weeks later, it'd be like, did you do it? I'm waiting for them to say, no, I didn't, right? Because that opens a whole door for me. I'd be like, why not? Why did you not take it, right? Because something is holding them back. And it's one of those things, typically, I don't have the resources, I don't have the skill set, or I don't even believe this is the right action to take. Something there exists that is holding them back. So that we got to discover what that is, right? For them to get the action.
So how do you,
take?
Or, you look at some of the elite top high performers in the world.
Yeah.
The one thing they all have in common in their field of expertise, I'm not even saying across the board, because even for myself, I wouldn't consider this across the board. But as being an expert at what I'm an expert at, dude, I am highly, highly confident in my ability.
Mm-hmm.
How do you get people to build confidence? Like, where does that come from? Because if that's one of the things, I think the how is pretty kind of self-evident. Go ask the questions, find the answer, do the thing. But if you don't have, it's like chicken and the egg, right?
Mm-hmm.
You can't have the confidence if you don't know how to do the thing, but you won't do the thing if you don't have the confidence, right?
Mm-hmm.
So how do you build the confidence? Where does that begin?
A lot of it comes from other people, Michael. I tell people all the time, if you don't have the confidence, borrow mine, right? Borrow some of my confidence that this is the right action and the right thing for you. A lot of that is social proof, right? Who else has done this action that achieved that result? And we if we don't have it ourselves, we got to go find it in someone else, right? Either you borrow it from your coach, you borrow it from someone who's really important to you in your life, or you borrow it from someone who has done what you want to do, has stood on the stage you want to stand on, has flown the airplane you want to fly. Did they do that, and did it work for them? And if so, that's confidence enough for me to try it, right?
Thank you so much for listening to Think Unbroken. Please share this episode with someone who could use it and help us move forward in our mission of ending generational trauma in our lifetime. And if you would, please take 5 seconds to pop on iTunes or Spotify, hit that 5-star, leave a review, and you can also reach out to us on social at Michael Unbroken or at Think Unbroken. And of course, you can check out our YouTube channel at Think Unbroken. Thank you for being a part of Unbroken Nation, my friends, and until next time, be unbroken. We'll be right back to today's show, but before we do, I want to let you know that you can get a free copy of my first book, Think Unbroken: Understanding and Overcoming Childhood Trauma, when you leave a review for the podcast on Apple Podcast, either on desktop or on your phone. All you have to do is go to Apple Podcasts, look up Think Unbroken, click follow in the top right, and then go and leave a review at the bottom. And when you leave that review, screenshot it and send it over to book.thinkunbroken.com, where you can upload your contact and mailing information, and we will send you a free copy of this award-winning best-selling book, absolutely free, including shipping. Just go to book.thinkunbroken.com to upload your screenshot review from Apple Podcasts for the Think Unbroken podcast. And until next time, my friend, be unbroken. I'll see ya.